Go. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this webinar today. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us to talk about this interesting topic. And we'll kick off right away. We're talking here today about agentic commerce and more generally the purchasing journeys on AI agents. So we're going to go over all the announcements that you might have seen in the news in the past few months, but also AI agents' history and how they influence the way brands interact with internet users and the web in general. This is a continuation of another webinar that we'll also talk a little bit about, which is a webinar we did with Michelle and Graeme back in August and September to talk about the transformation of the web, also called the agentic web. So I hope you'll stay until the end. Thanks to everyone who's joining us. We'll try to make this fun, and of course, you'll get the replay of the webinar at the end. So we'll begin with a very quick introduction of Boxoffice. So Maureen and Graeme, I'm the managing director of the Boost division. Graeme is the head of our marketing services for exhibitors. We focus at Boxoffice on supporting exhibitors of all sizes on three major topics: attracting, converting, and retaining customers. So our main goal is to attract customers to your websites via an expert SEO strategy, search and social and programmatic ads. We then convert those visitors into paying customers thanks to our digital products. So we build websites, online ticketing, mobile apps, etc. And finally, we ensure that you retain those customers thanks to targeted CRM campaigns, reputation management, social media management, etc. So we're here doing these webinars for two reasons. The first is we're very interested in AI and curious about everything that's happening at the moment. We think it's important, that it's going to change the way people interact with the web in the coming years. So we also here to position ourselves as experts for the industry, share with you our findings, and answer your questions if you have any. So today we're going to look at 5 topics. The first one is a reminder of what an agentic web is, which was again that first webinar, but we'll go over this briefly. Then we'll talk about agentic purchase journeys. Then we'll get to the heart of the matter, which is agentic commerce, and we'll see what its current usage is. Is it a myth or a reality so far? And finally, we'll look at the different types of agents that exist and how they work. So we'll start with basically a general overview and then delve down into the more technical details and explain how it works. So we'll start with the agentic web, which is a somewhat complex term that many people are still getting familiar with. But what that means is that it's a web that is structured for AI agents. So that's a simple definition, but we'll take a step back and ask ourselves, what is even an AI agent? So an AI agent is an entity which relies on a model to perform actions. So that's a key difference between a chatbot and an agent is the chatbot doesn't necessarily take actions, whereas the agent can take actions. So when we talk about an agent, we're referring to a chatbot that can make purchases, one that can go to an e-commerce site, one that can do an internet search, and you name it. So we're talking about things that rely on agents, and they rely on an agent that can take an action. So by definition, the agentic web is on the web, and the interface for accessing information is an AI agent like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Mistral, DeepSeek, Gemini, Claude, you name it. And that's going to change the role of websites because that's what we're going to look into today, and especially the role of e-commerce sites. So we'll take a quick example. If you go on ChatGPT, you ask it what pair of shoes it recommends for running a marathon. So ChatGPT will generate an AI response based on the information that it finds on the internet. It'll go and scrape and visit the websites of New Balance, Nike, Adidas, etc. to advise you on a pair of shoes. So we can clearly see that the end user isn't going to go to those websites himself, but will consume this web content via a conversational interface, via an agent. And this interaction with the web is what we call the agentic web. And we can clearly see it in this example. This is ChatGPT. Obviously, Google is in on this. The first experience that they launched a few years ago already is called AI Overviews. It's live everywhere in the world except for 3 countries, France, China, and Turkey. So AI overviews are basically like ChatGPT, except they're integrated into the Google search interface, which makes it pretty powerful. So here's an example. If you ask, what is AI overviews, for example, on Google, the text that you see here is generated by artificial intelligence based on the sources listed on the right. So these sources are scraped by Google, and the AI summarizes the information it found on those websites to give you the answer to your question. As a result, there's potentially less traffic going to these websites since the answer is given right away, which can be a challenge for brands. So we drew a little diagram to illustrate how this all works. So if you ask an agent, what is Boxoffice? So whether it's Copilot, Gemini, or any of the others, in all cases, the agent will search a web index and obtain a list of websites that can answer this question. It will then scrape these websites, summarize everything it found on the internet, and display its answer in its conversational interface or its in search interface if we're talking about AI overview. Okay. And I'm going to pass it off to Graeme to continue delving into this a little more.
Thanks, Maureen. Yeah, so there's another important point just to preface everything that we're going to talk about today, which is that you may have heard people differentiating AI engines and search engines, basically saying that it's not really the same thing. So search engines, we're obviously all familiar with them. They generate thousands of billions of searches every single year on platforms like Google, which is obviously the main one. We also have Bing, Yandex, Yahoo, DuckDuckGo, etc. But people are now saying that this is the old way that you actually search on the internet. And that's now been opposed to the new chatbot era with ChatGPT, Gemini, etc. But it's likely that this differentiation is probably not going to last long because search engines are going to have to integrate AI chatbots, and chatbots are always going to be grounded on the information that's available on the internet. So this is obviously given birth to what we are now calling generative engines. And generative engines are the buckets where you put Google AI overviews and ChatGPT under the same umbrella, which is a search experience based on AI generation. So in the coming slides, we'll talk about GE, which are generative engines, and we won't differentiate between chatbots and search engines. So I'm sure everyone is familiar with SEO, search engine optimization. The idea with SEO is obviously to improve your website's ranking and the traditional search engines. And then we have the new kid on the block, which is GEO, and that's generative engine optimization. So the change in terminology, this relates to the shift between a search engine and a generative search engine. On the left, the goal is to improve the website's ranking, while on the right, it's to ensure the information on your website or the information that benefits you is being used in the AI-generated response. So this is a brand new discipline. It's called GEO. It's a paradigm shift, but it's not necessarily a big change in the methods that we actually use. Since some of the methods that were very useful for SEO and got your website ranking highly will also be useful when it comes to GEO, although there are some nuances in terms of what you need to do for GEO. So why are we looking at this? Well, this is just really to give you the basics for understanding later what agentic commerce is, and we'll shortly move on to more kind of agent-related aspects of that. So here we have a quote from the CEO of Google DeepMind. So for anyone who's not familiar, Google DeepMind is a company based in the UK that was acquired by Google. And their CEO says, a web designed for agents no longer needs web pages. And so what he's actually saying there is that it's kind of the end of websites since customers get their answers in generative engines instead. Now, we're not quite sure at Boxoffice that we fully agree with that, but it is interesting nonetheless. And let's take a kind of further look at why he's kind of saying that. So we've tried to simplify this idea for you using two diagrams. So the first one is a diagram that explains the internet user's role and their relationship to the traditional search engine. So a traditional search engine is really just a portal. It's going to be Google, there's Bing, so on and so forth. And basically that's going to take you to another interface, which is the website itself. And that's indicated by the small blue lines here. And this interface of the site allows us to consume the database. So that could be a text database, an e-commerce database. For a cinema website like yourselves, it's a movie and showtimes database. And until now, internet users would go to the search engines and then they would be redirected to the website. But the change from this web to the agentic web is a complete transformation, since the web consumption interface is no longer the website, but the actual AI agent itself. And so here, I place this purple bar, which represents the user interface. And when we interact with OpenAI, Perplexity, so on, the consumption of that web data is then done via the chatbot. So you're no longer redirected to the website. The AI agent is actually performing that search of the internet for you. And so the websites are a little bit grayed out in this. And we could ask the question of what the usefulness is of websites in a world where people are consuming that information from the web via agents. And that's really the big revolution of the agentic web. Now, we don't have too much time to go into the detail of that. That was really just a 10-minute summary. As Maureen mentioned, we did do a whole previous webinar on that exact topic. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out and we can send that on to you. And that kind of summarizes all of these issues of the agentic web, and it's about an hour long as well. Okay, so in this context at Boxoffice, what we're now working on is what we call local GEO. So GEO is just, as we mentioned, generative engine optimization. And you can basically just think of that as SEO for generative AI search engines. And then the localization of that is just people searching for localized terms within the ChatGPT or AI interface. And so simply when we talk to ChatGPT, this is just an example. If I was to search, or I was to ask it, I'm going to be in Belfast on Saturday night, can you recommend a cinema? And ChatGPT is simply going to suggest a handful of specific cinemas to me. And so we can see that that's like SEO, but since it's in ChatGPT, we call it GEO. But what really needs to be understood with that is that it's a kind of major message of today is that beyond being a change of user interface, there is also a paradigm shift as well. When you do a search on a traditional search engine, the websites or the Google Maps listings, when they're actually represented to you, they're in a specific order of appearance. So that's to say you have a number 1 ranked website, a number 2 ranked website, a number 3 ranked website, so on and so forth. And so that was a real hierarchy, but it wasn't necessarily a judgment of value. That's to say that, for example, if I just skip to the next slide here, sorry, this one here. So you can see here that the flower shop, if I have a user searching for a flower shop, the one that appears in the first position on the Google search results, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best flower shop. It just means that they have good SEO, and that's why they're actually ranking in that number 1 position. However, when you talk to an agent, and in fact, the AI agent has a more prescriptive approach to that. So the AI agent will actually make a recommendation to you. And this recommendation will be, for example, I advise you to go to such and such a florist tomorrow to get a gift for your wife, and so on and so forth. And in fact, this recommendation that the AI agent actually makes to you, this will greatly influence the decision that you actually make on whether you go to that florist or not. Whereas in the era of traditional SEO, the user really does all their own research. So you would look at the website, you would read the online reviews, and you would do all of that groundwork yourself. When you're talking to Gemini, AI overviews, ChatGPT, etc., it's really like one person is giving advice, but they're giving advice to the whole planet, and that person can be influenced, and that's where GEO comes in. So you can think of GEO as not just a technical change, but really a paradigm shift in how we're actually working. So when we ask a question to an AI, you need to remember as well that the AI will have all of the personal context, all of it stored in its memory. So everything you've previously spoken to the AI about, it doesn't actually start from scratch every time. It uses everything that you've told it in the past to give you the best result for what you're asking it. So if I give you an example, if I wanted to go to Sicily with my partner and I asked the AI for hotels, and the AI recommended one saying, perfect, I've found you this hotel, it's next to a hospital, which will be really useful for you to help with treatment for your partner. But in the question I'd asked the AI, I hadn't actually told it that my partner was hurt or sick. But then I remember that 2 months previously, I had asked ChatGPT, how do you treat this health issue? My partner is suffering with it. And so it understands that situation, and it uses that additional context to advise me on what I'm speaking to the AI about. So what we see is that, unlike traditional search engines, the searches are much more contextual, much more conversational. It's really a discussion between you and the AI, and therefore the recommendations are often better that it gives you. but at the same time, they're also more prescriptive. In addition to that, the AI also often presents you with comparisons. So it can say, I recommend Hotel A if you prefer this type of hotel, but Hotel B if you prefer a hotel with a swimming pool. That's fine. It still leaves me with a little bit of free will there, and then I can make the decision. But there's then also suggestions like, if you've already been to this hotel, then I would recommend this place, but you can also go there and there. And finally, there's more prescriptive recommendations where it says, you should go there. This is a great place. This is a hotel I recommend. And there, in fact, that poses a real question as to whether an individual's free will still applies when the AI is giving that direct recommendation. Okay, so moving on to some more practical advice. So the first advice from the first part of this webinar is for everyone to try and enrich your data as much as possible. So what do we mean by that? Well, because, as we mentioned, searches are much more contextual when you're using AI, the AI actually needs additional information. So for example, if I have a child and I want to find a child-friendly screening at a cinema, but your cinema website content doesn't mention that you do child-friendly screenings, then it may not be recommended by the AI. And so everything that you see on the left here, this is what we call attributes in a Google Maps listing, and you can add these in your Google Business Profile. And so a lot of this information will be associated with your Google Maps listing or your Google Business listing. The same applies to things like your FAQs on your website, and then also on your cinema location pages, or any additional content pages that you have on your website as well. So the more that you can actually structure your content and enrich that data, the better the AI will be able to answer the questions with your brand, and the more visibility you'll get in the AI engines as a result of that. So as we mentioned, box office, we're now working on what we call local GEO. So local GEO comes down to, for example, asking an AI questions like, I'm looking for a cinema in Austin, I'm looking for a cinema in Glasgow, I'm looking for a child-friendly screening in Liverpool. And what we basically do is we do what's called GEO tracking. So we use technologies that will ask the AI platforms those same questions over and over again to understand how trends work and see what the AI thinks about your business and see what your visibility is in those AI tools for the prompts that we are actually tracking. And what it will essentially do is it will ask that same question over and over, and then you can see the impact on your business, since you'll be able to understand what the people start to think about your company based on the AI results, also what they think about your competitors, and how the AI actually compares you to the competition. And therefore, that will start to influence individuals on whether or not to adopt your brand, as you can see what it's saying about your competitors and yourselves. So we're doing these studies for some of our clients on the local level. We're asking those same prompts over and over. And then we're looking at all the sources of information that the AI uses. So the sources will include things like your own cinema location pages, which are super important, third-party business directories, third-party press sites, so things like the Box Office Pro and other industry-relevant press websites, UGC, which is user-generated content. So sites like Reddit are really important. They get a lot of visibility in AI tools, and so on and so forth. So by identifying those sources of information that are used by AI, you can then start to influence those sources. You can supplement them, you can adapt them, and then we'll also be able to classify the brands that are recommended. For example, is your brand found more than your competitor, or vice versa? And then we can start to track that over time and give you recommendations based on how you're performing. Okay, so we're not quite on the topic of today, which is agentic commerce, just quite yet. We are getting there, and this is all related. So I'm just going to give you some kind of free tips that will apply to any GEO strategy. And these are questions that we're getting more and more every day at Box Office. A lot of customers are now asking us, how do I show up in AI tools? How do I get more visibility in AI tools? And this is really the topic of 2026 so far. If you go on LinkedIn, you'll probably see there's loads of people talking about GEO. It's everywhere. So this is really the hot topic of the moment. And to be honest, a lot of companies are quite lost on the subject. So at Box Office, we really position ourselves as experts, and we support our clients on local search. And now we're starting to support our clients on GEO as well. So the first piece of advice, as we mentioned previously, is to have structured data, and that is for your products. Make sure you're structuring that data for your information, make sure it's completed. And I'll show you an example of that in a second to show you what that actually means. And the second is to be omnipresent. So that means to have your information wherever you can, basically. So everything you do and every service that you offer, have that information on as many places online as you possibly can. So that's third-party business directories, industry-relevant websites, press websites. All of these are really important in terms of getting that extra visibility. In our first webinar, we talked about fan out, which is the technique used by AI to search for information. If you have a watch of that webinar, in order for this to work, you need to have that same information everywhere. So make sure you distribute that information as much as you can. And the third tip is social proof, which what we mean by that is AI looks at things like press articles, customer reviews are really, really important, and so on and so forth. So again, make sure you're keeping an eye on things like that. So these are really the three pillars for a GEO strategy. So as mentioned, the first subject is structured data, and I just wanted to give you a quick example of that because not a lot of people know what this means. So when an AI visits a website, it's important that you remember that the AI can't see what we can see on the website. So it doesn't look at the website like a user does. It can't see the color of the button. It won't see whether that button's on the right or left. It can't see all the nice visual images that you have on your website. So it's necessary that you start to think of your website more as a database. So you can test this, go to your website, right click on it and click on inspect. And then you can see the data that the AI will be able to read about your website. So the user interface, the user experience, that lovely design that you have on your website, that isn't going to be important for an AI. It's important for a user, but what will be important for the AI is how your data is actually structured. So things like schema markup is really, really important, which is additional code that's entered into the page to give the AI tool more context about what the page is about. But also things like the content of the page itself, the metadata, any additional like alt tags and things like that are super important as well. And then that way, when it looks at the page, you can see, okay, this is a movie schedule, this is a movie info page, this is a location page, and so on and so forth. So yeah, when you think about your website, don't just think about what humans are looking at. You also have to think about AI tools now as well. And for all brands that have a box office website, we've recently redesigned our code, and this is for our location detail pages, for your events pages, and coming very soon for your movie pages as well. And this is essentially optimizing them for AI. So it can basically clearly read all the information that's present on the pages and also gives them additional context about the pages. So it gives them like the cast members, the director, the runtime of the movie. All this additional code is on the page so the AI tool can read it. If you're not with Boxoffice, we would recommend you ask your website provider about this because it's going to be, super important for 2026. The second topic we mentioned is omnipresence. So this advice is really just to make sure you're optimizing your Google business profile, your Google Maps listings, and as mentioned, distribute that information in as many third-party, high-quality, relevant directories that you possibly can. The more websites that you're present on, the more industry-specific websites that reference you, the higher the AI will actually rank you when it comes to local GEO. And so the idea is that when you ask a question, an AI is going to look at all these different websites. By you being consistently present on all of these websites that it checks, you increase your chances of being recommended by the AI tool. And lastly, we mentioned social proof. I think the big one here for you guys is really all about your reviews and your user-generated content. So really important that you actually take care of your online reputation. They're becoming a really important topic because the AI tool is going to read all of your reviews and they will actually influence what the business recommends. So yeah, really important you stay on top of your reviews, make sure you're engaging with them, make sure you're answering them. And over time, that will start to improve the reviews you get and also your overall review rating as well. So I'm going to pass it back over to Maureen and she's going to talk to us a little bit about agentic purchase journeys.
Yeah, thanks, Graeme. So yeah, we're going to distinguish to start two types of online searches, whether it's on ChatGPT, on Google, or anywhere else. So we can distinguish between what we call informational searches versus transactional searches. So an informational search will be a search for how long to cook an egg for example, versus transactional searches, which will assume a purchase. So today, these transactional searches are still traditionally done on regular search engines. Like if you want to buy life insurance or an iPhone or a movie ticket, you're going to go to an e-commerce website and do that there. But what's interesting is that the AI agents want to respond to these transactional searches now, and that's the whole concept of agentic commerce that we're going to be looking at. So before we get into agentic commerce as such, we're going to define the agentic purchase journeys. There's a few of them. So it's an online purchase journey during which an AI agent like ChatGPT or Copilot accompanies the internet user's journey from information search to the transaction. So there are four types of agentic purchase journeys. The first is agentic commerce. That's what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. It's an e-commerce purchase for an agent. The second is agent booking. So instead of a purchase, it's making a reservation via an agent. So booking a hairdresser appointment, a restaurant table, an appointment at an agency of some kind. So there's no money exchange here. That's really the difference. The third, in the third and fourth, we won't really go into that yet today, but it's agentic ordering. So the ability to order food via Uber Eats, for example. And finally, the fourth is agentic subscription, which allows you to subscribe to an insurance or a service anywhere directly from an agent. So to give you an idea of the impact that agentic commerce and agentic purchase journeys will have in the future, we're going to take a quick look at the hotel industry. So in the hotel industry, you have platforms where you go to book a room, such as Booking.com, Expedia, Airbnb. I'm sure we've all used those. So those websites are what we call the entry point. And what we realize is that whoever holds the entry points holds the transaction. And that's an important thing to remember. So Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, said in a recent interview that if ChatGPT finds you the best hotel, so that's here we're focused on the discovery, right? And it allows you to book it with one click. So that's talking about a purchase. By taking a small commission, that's understandable. We'll do it at some point. So if I was working for Booking.com, that might worry me a little bit because to enter this market, what's needed is to be the discovery interface. And ChatGPT has already become the discovery interface. So when Booking.com or others take high commissions on reservations, if ChatGPT enters this market in the same way as Google or Copilot or others by offering a lower commission, they could really transform the hotel industry. So this is quite important. Everyone is aware and understands well the use of AI for process improvements, and we use it for process improvements and to save time in our everyday jobs. But it will really also impact the way we interact with companies and the way we shop, and that's really the whole topic for today. I'm going to give you another example of agentic booking. So let's say I need to book an appointment to get my car fixed. So I have a gap in my schedule tomorrow at 3 p.m. So in today's world, pre-ChatGPT, what do? I go on Google Maps, I search for auto repair shop near me or something like that. And I'm going to go see that there's 3 options. That's great. And then I'm going to try calling the first one, right? And well, my luck, they don't answer the phone. So I'll go to their website, see if there's a booking system. No, it doesn't. Never mind. So I'll go and call the second garage, and they're going to tell me, oh, sorry, we're booked today at 3 p.m., etc. So all that to say that this type of experience can take a lot of time. Same if you're trying to find a restaurant table for a whole group on a Saturday night. It can be a nightmare for you to do that today. So as a result, a lot of companies are working on improving that experience via agentic booking. So now let's take an example of what that could look like on ChatGPT or Gemini. You would ask, can you find an auto repair shop near me available on Saturday at 3 p.m.? And there it would respond, yes, of course. There are 3 garages available on Saturday at 3 p.m. for an appointment less than 10 minutes away from your home. So there it checked all the shop's availability and right away gave me options. And then it could say, in particular, I recommend the Motorcraft Garage because it has good Google reviews and offers quality services related to your needs. So I had expressed my need previously, I remembered that, and so I can also take that into account in picking the right service provider. And then it can say, do you want me to reserve the 3 p.m. slot for you? So now we're really talking about a booking agent. So we explained the difference between an agent and a chatbot. That is that the chatbot handles the conversation while the agent takes action. And what interests us is this last point. Would you like me to reserve the 3 p.m. slot? Here you see the entire acquisition funnel, the whole process I described of calling and going on the websites to find an appointment. Multiple clicks, multiple phone calls, now reduced to a single conversation. So an interesting question to ask now is, how would ChatGPT or Gemini or others know about availabilities? How do they know the calendars of these companies, the hairdresser schedules, the restaurant schedules, etc.? And so, well, actually for years now, Google and ChatGPT have been preparing for this moment. I'm sure you've seen this before, that blue button on this is a supercut listing, but you can have it on all kinds of listing. If you search for a business name and a city name, it's called Reserve with Google. So that came out a few years ago. At the time, it was pretty revolutionary, and it simply allowed a business to put a big, highly visible blue button on their Google listing to boost their bookings. So this was a call to action that can really help reservations. In order for that to work, Google actually established connections between the business booking tool and its back office. So when a business sets up a Reserve with Google, it connects its calendar, and that's really the first step towards that agentic booking. Because so tomorrow when people search for find me a restaurant or a hotel or whatever, well, every business who connected their calendars or their booking system to Google will have the information as to the availability that they have immediately to tell the user if it's available and then make that reservation. So we're not 100% there yet in Gemini or ChatGPT, but we can see that these companies and these systems are already gathering that information, and so we're getting there pretty damn quickly. So there you have it. We were talking about agentic booking. Now we're going to go into the heart of today's topic, which is agentic commerce. So remember, agentic commerce is an agentic purchasing journey specialized in e-commerce. So I'll take a super quick step back to define the evolution of e-commerce. So from 2006 to 2016, that was really a time when it blew up and everybody said, I need an e-commerce website. All major brands, Sephora, Walmart, etc., created their e-commerce website at that time. And to give an example for scale, in France, they went from 20,000 e-commerce websites to 200,000 e-commerce websites in 10 years. So that was a really big revolution at the time. And what was important for those websites then was SEO content, conversion rates, product landing pages. That was the key things to get those website ranked. But in 2016, a new revolution came along, and that was the rise of marketplaces. Think Amazon, Alibaba, all these. They revolutionized e-commerce, and that was a big shift. So today, about 60% of e-commerce purchases are taking place on marketplaces, which is massive, right? So some of these marketplaces can be specialized for an industry. And what's important for a brand that wants to do e-commerce is, of course, they still need to have their own e-commerce website. But since 60% of e-commerce takes place on marketplaces, it's also essential to be present on them. So for our industry, obviously, we're talking about Fandango, Atom Ticket, Ingresso, if you're in Brazil, etc. So therefore, a new need has emerged at that time, which was disseminating your product information across multiple websites and platforms. And that really revolutionized the e-commerce about 10 years ago. And now there's a third revolution coming. We're in 2026. And for the next 10 years, what we're likely to see blow up is agentic commerce. So people are already chatting with AI on conversational interfaces. will people tomorrow do their shopping on these same interfaces? And therefore, will it eliminate the need to go to marketplaces or to go to online retailers' websites? Of course, it will never be 100% of purchases that happen on agentic commerce, but will it be 10%, 20%, 70% of e-commerce that will use agentic commerce? We don't know, and that's really the question we're asking today. So what agentic commerce, or rather the agents, are doing is retracing the purchase journey. To explain what that means, we're going to look at something that most marketers are familiar with, which is the awareness funnel. That breaks down into awareness. So I should say the purchasing funnel, sorry. Awareness, interest, decision, and action. That's what that is. So how does AI impact this funnel? So the first point is awareness. So specifically, it involves informational requests. For example, how do I prepare for a marathon, right? So in this case, all I'm asking is very high-level generic information. That's level 1. Then once you have that information, you might think, okay, I'm interested. What do I need to prepare? How do I choose a pair of shoes? That's a tricky sentence. So that's the kind of question that you might ask next. And if I was doing that research myself, it could take me a long time to go on blogs and read all the product reviews. Here, instead, I can get a structured answer. The AI is going to give us a framework, and this framework will be based on a mix of information, opinions, reviews, and so on. So here we find, again, the importance of product reviews. And so to define a framework for analysis, AI won't just go to the brand's website. It will go and read all the user-generated content. So then once I have been given a full analysis, well, I'm going to ask what it would advise me to do, right? And so remember that this agent whom I talk to all the time potentially has a lot of information about me. It can know my weight, my age, my geographical location, how long I train for this marathon, etc. So logically, this agent is in the best position to give me an advice on what would be the best product for me. And so that brings us to the point that is crucial, which is the point of the purchase decision. This raises the question of whether a decision is being delegated to the AI, right? Is it choosing for me? So that's why we've been saying all along that there's this paradigm shift where now the AI can decide for us what we should buy. And I'm going to show you a little bit how an AI can support us in this decision-making process. So as you can see, this is an AI overview that you're now familiar with. We were talking about that, which again, it's Gemini embedded into Google search. It goes to a different website, grabs some information, summarizes it into an answer for the question that you ask. So here I'm asking about the difference between the Switch and the Switch 2, which I don't know which one to buy. So the AI is going to go to a lot of websites, view YouTube videos, go to specialized website, and generate points of comparison for me. So again, this is all live, so you can do it yourself. Now, the AI has launched recently a new feature to really help with this product comparison so that they can really help you in that decision-making process. So on the left here, you can ask for a face cream. When I search for this face cream in Gemini, I get several product suggestions. I can select the products that interest me. There's, in some cases, a little checkbox that you can see to say, I'm interested in this one, this one, this one. And then it will compare the products that I've selected, which is what you see on the right. So whether I select 10 or 2 creams, it will make a comparison grid to read the reviews, etc. This product comparison also applies to retail locations. So if I'm searching on Google for an Asian restaurant near Glasgow, for example, you'll see a few options. You click on that one and that one, you compare them for me, and you see all the results, right? And that works for pretty much any business out there, including movie theaters. So here we find really one of the main ideas of this webinar, which is that online reviews play a key role in defining what AI thinks of you. For many years, we've heard some customers say, no, nobody reads online reviews. Who's got the time, really? But now you know that AI reads them. Even if your consumers don't, AI reads them, and that informs how AI is going to think of you. And it's even one of its preferred sources of information for comparing retail locations and products. So for us at Box Office, we've built an expertise in online reputation management for a number of cinema tickets. So if ever that's something that you feel like you don't have the time to do, but would like to have more information about reputation management, please don't hesitate to reach out. So now to go back to the ChatGPT interface, there's this new interface that has been launched, which, to be honest, we have yet to be able to reproduce. So it looks like this is being rolled out now, but so this is all based on an announcement. So first, let's say you say, I want a laptop. So it's going to ask you a few questions. What size, what's your budget, what style, and so on. So here I'm answering these preliminary questions, and then I'll be able to say, okay, I'm interested in this, I want more of that, or things like this. And here it's using machine learning to really go and find the right computer for me. So in this demonstration video, once you've chosen your laptop that exactly matches your needs, you can compare its feature and then the prices, and you can buy it. You enter your delivery address, your credit card, and during this whole process, you don't leave ChatGPT, you don't leave Gemini. So this is full-on agentic commerce. That is to say, the act of purchasing integrated into the conversational interface. Okay. So now going back to the purchase funnel, the last part of that funnel is what we call the operated transaction, which is specifically what we just described, the AI placing the order for me on an e-commerce site. And so the user will then validate the transaction within the conversational interface and say, can you prepare my order? So imagine that you'd basically be witnessing a contraction of the marketing funnel. It used to be a long decision-making process, which now could be entirely delegated. It's all shrunk and compressed into a single discussion. That's why GEO is such a hot topic, and it's important for all businesses. And that's why you need support to make this happen, because you really want to stay on top of all of that. So if we push that a tiny bit further, you could imagine a future where you say to an AI chatbot, you know me, buy me some shoes, to go back to our marathon example. And that's all. So in that case, you delegate everything, the entire purchasing journey. Okay. And I'm going to pass it on to Graeme now to continue on with the current usage of Agentic Commerce.
Thanks, Marine. Yeah, so a question that people often ask is, the technology is great, but do people actually use this, or do people even want to purchase like this? The biggest objection is I would never buy anything through ChatGPT. So yeah, rather than us just giving our opinion, there's already been a bunch of studies on this topic. So from McKinsey Group and the Boston Consulting Group, etc. And to save you the trouble, we've just tried to summarize 3 or 4 key things that seem to be the most interesting in these studies. And yeah, we're just going to run through those with you. So the first finding is from a McKinsey study in the US. They basically asked people, what is your preferred source of information when researching or taking a decision about a brand, a product, or a service? And we can see that generative AI engines account for 44% of preferred sources, which is the purple segment there, compared to traditional search engines, which are at 31%, that's the blue segment. But we also know in this blue section, it's mostly Google, and we know that Google also uses AI, especially in its AI overviews, which are now powered by Gemini. And so if you think about it, it's actually around 75% of sources to choose products or services are impacted by GEO, which is obviously a huge number. Now, we also have some clients at Box Office who say to us, yeah, but we don't actually see much website traffic coming from ChatGPT or Gemini to my website. And that's really not the right way to look at this. Why? Because people actually go to Gemini, ChatGPT, Copilot, and they make their purchase decision while they're with these agents. And then they'll go to your site and they'll go to Google, or they'll find it via another platform, but they'll never really go directly from the chatbot to your website. So to illustrate that, there's this sentence from Profound, who's a company leader in GEO tracking. And what they say is that ChatGPT and AI agents have become the hidden drivers behind consumers' purchasing decisions. And they give a figure here that nearly 30% of Black Friday sales were influenced by an AI, which represents around $22 billion in revenue. And to prove this, they did a thing that's called eye tracking. So eye tracking, if you're not familiar, this is when you ask, in this case, it was 1,600 people to do a search, for example, to go and buy some shoes. And then they followed these 600 people while they're doing this to see what they're actually looking at. And so with this, they saw that people were actually going to ChatGPT, and then afterwards they would go to other websites. So they put a percentage of where the people were going afterwards. So after going to ChatGPT, 24% of people went on to Google, 20% went to Amazon, 19% went directly to the brand's website, and 15% went to a retail location. And finally, you have 20% in this other category, but maybe they didn't go anywhere at all. For these, obviously, there's no visibility for you since you're not able to track people who have interacted with ChatGPT and other platforms in this way. But so what we actually see here is it's not because there's no allocation of traffic from AI engines to your website that there's no impact. And so I'm going to read what Profound's conclusion was as a result of the study. And they say that the decisions made are made in generative engines, while transactions are completed on marketplaces, brand websites, in-store, or via Google. So in other terms, AI serves for discovery, while Google intervenes for validation and final data processing. But personally, we don't agree with the point that Google only intervenes in the validation process, because as we've already talked about, Google's catching up with that discovery phase. We've just demonstrated that before. But it's still interesting to see that just because you have a low traffic attribution coming from AI, it doesn't mean that it has little to no impact on your visibility. So the data we looked at in the past couple of slides, these were actually based on US studies. Every time we talk about the US studies, our European friends get a little bit upset. We often hear, yes, but in France or Germany or in the UK, that's going to happen much later. We're kind of slow to adapt. People will never want to use AI to compare products and so on. So let's see what the data says. This is a study by Opinionway, which was presented at a retail tech event a couple of months ago. And they surveyed just over 1,000 respondents in France. And we can see here that 30% of those people already use AI to search for information on products. And that number actually climbs to almost 60% when looking at 25 to 34 specifically. Now, there's another question from here, which is to say, okay, so people are doing their research on AI before making purchases. What proportion of those French people actually want to buy directly through an agent? Are people afraid to put their credit card information into ChatGPT, into Gemini, into Copilot, or are they actually ready to do that? So there's another study here. This was still done by Opinionway, and that shows that 34% of French people are actually ready to buy online directly via an AI without going through the brand's website. So already we know that a third of French people are ready to make their purchase in ChatGPT and Gemini. And that's pretty mind-blowing, because when we talk about agentic commerce, people will say yes, but nobody's willing to put their money, their payment details into ChatGPT. And we can clearly see from this study that yes, in fact, many people are actually willing to do that. So we've reached the end of the first four parts. We'll now move on to the final part of today's presentation, and we'll discuss the various types of e-commerce agents. And we're going to talk about on-site agents, the operators, and the protocol agents. So the first type of e-commerce agent is what we call on-site agents. So these are agents that are on your own website, on the Sephora website, on the website of Delta Airlines, etc. And so this basically corresponds to implementing a native chatbot dedicated to the e-commerce website. So this agent has a somewhat limited scope of action. So that's to say that the agent can only, for example, sell Sephora products on the Sephora website, obviously. And then you have the second type of agents, which are the operators. You may have already heard of the operators. These are like AI agents that can take control of your computer to browse the web for you. They have like an open field of action, which is the entire internet essentially. And they can go to like e-commerce websites and they can browse that for you and actually buy products for you. And then the third type, in our opinion, is one with the most potential, and it's what we call agent protocols. You might have already heard of MCP, but there's a new agentic protocol which is called the Agentic Commerce Protocol, or ACP, and we'll explain a little bit about how that works in a second. So just to look at the first type, which is on-site agents. Again, I'm sure most people are probably familiar with these. These are chatbots that you can find on your own website or the brand's own website. So what can you do as cinemas? Well, it's all about integrating a conversational AI experience on your website. So this can be to help users, advise them on the products, so what's now playing at your cinema, your loyalty program, your special types of screenings, etc. Now at Box Office, this is something that is on our roadmap for later this year. Firstly, with a conversational agent that will respond to queries based on your website documentation, your FAQs, your actual content on the website. And then later, an AI agent that would be truly transactional. So this is one that could actually refund transactions, etc. So just some examples of on-site agents. Again, we're probably all familiar with these. So you've got like the trip planner chatbot, which you can use on booking.com that can help you plan your holiday. We've got the chatbot from Shopify. And then on the right-hand side, you have another type of sales agent, this one from Amazon. It's called Rufus. This is actually live on Amazon just now, so you can go on and play about with this. It basically allows you to compare products with each other on the Amazon platform based on things like their reviews, their price, etc. And so Rufus is like a decision-making tool for purchasing on Amazon. Moving on to the second type of agent, we have the operators. So these are AI agents that can actually take control of your computer and browse the website for you. Basically, if you want your website to work on this type of agent, then you need to make your website readable and operable by AI agents and AI navigators. Now, I don't know if anyone will have heard of this, but this is Atlas, or ChatGPT Atlas. So a few months ago, there was like a wave which consisted of the AI agents developing their own web browsers. So Atlas was developed by OpenAI or ChatGPT. Comet was developed by Perplexity. So essentially, these AI companies all decided that they wanted to have their own web browser. So why did the web browser suddenly become so important to them? The reason is a web browser like Chrome or Safari is what allows web pages to be operated. So if we want to have an AI that goes to a website and actually buys products for us, to do this operator mode requires you to have your own browser. And so you can go onto Atlas and you can test this if you want. Just a word of caution, there are a lot of vulnerabilities with this. It can lead to you getting hacked. It is still very early stages for this type of technology. So we would advise against regular use for now, but yeah, still go on and yeah, you can check it out just to understand what an AI browser can do. So on operator mode on the right there, you can see we made a request of the AI, and from there, the AI then takes control of your browser window. So it navigates the website, it does your shopping, it switches between pages, it reads the text, and so on. So the technology itself, it is quite impressive. It's obviously capable of reading and understanding a web interface and taking actions on it. But yeah, still early days for this type of technology. So this operator mode, this introduced a kind of major innovation, which was the Buy For Me feature, which was launched in April 2025 by Amazon. This concept is pretty simple. For any products that are not for sale on the Amazon platform, Amazon can actually offer to buy it for you on other marketplaces. So for example, there's a pair of leggings that I want, but it's not on Amazon, but it's on another website. You can see the Buy For Me button, and Amazon's AI will go and buy that from the other website using your credit card details, your delivery information, all from your Amazon account. So this is a real revolution in approach, since Amazon can potentially be the e-commerce platform that lists 100% of products, since it's able to go and buy them from other websites for me. So it basically means, why would I need to go to any other e-commerce website when Amazon can just do everything for me? And they already have my credit card details, plus I have Amazon Prime, they have my delivery details, etc. So yeah, this one is yeah, very interesting. But of course, Google seen what Amazon done and had to counter. So they came up with Buy For Me with Google, which was launched in 1 month after Amazon's in May 2025. Very close to Amazon's innovation, but with one additional feature, which is around the pricing. So you can basically say to them, I want to buy this product, but I want it as soon as it's under, for example, $95 online, and then you can leave. And then what will happen is, as soon as there's a promotion or as soon as that product becomes available for that price, there'll be a pop-up to tell you that it's been found at that price, and then you can just go ahead and pay with Google and buy it. And then there you have it. You have your product at that price that you wanted it at. That will work with all products. And again, that's another innovation. So it's the Buy For Me feature, but with that added price dimension. So again, that one is pretty cool. So the operator mode, that may initiate a transformation of e-commerce websites and how we adapt e-commerce websites to basically allow AI agents to consume the content on them, or in many cases, maybe not. So I've talked to you about on-site agents and operators. The final one we're going to talk to you about is agent protocol. So protocol agents, using the example of ACP, which stands for Agentic Commerce Protocol, also known as instant checkout. An example of this is on ChatGPT. So if I ask a question, for example, can you find me a gift? It will show me options of products. And then when I click on a product, it's going to give me the option to pay directly in the ChatGPT interface. So in this visual, the purchase is actually on Etsy, which is the marketplace. And so we see that there's a collaboration between ChatGPT and that marketplace via a protocol that allows people to buy directly on ChatGPT connected to those various marketplaces. And that's what the instant checkout is. So if we try and understand a little bit about how that works. So to summarize, it was launched in September of last year. So ChatGPT becomes the purchase interface, essentially, with the product cards like we showed you on the last slide. The merchant, which in this case was Etsy, but it can also be Walmart, it can be Target or whatever. The merchant remains what we call the merchant of record. All that means is they hold the transactional data, they handle the logistics, they provide the customer support. So it's not ChatGPT, as you can imagine, that will handle any of that. It's the e-commerce merchant that will handle all of that. And then they will pay OpenAI a small fee, which is a percentage of the transaction value. And then, of course, we also have to pay Stripe, which is the payment processor, to collect the money, to check for fraud, and so on. And there already, there's a few companies that have reportedly made this integration. So we have Etsy, there's Walmart, there's Shopify, Salesforce, PayPal, and so on, a lot of the big players in the markets. So to simplify this even further, we can say there's 3 pillars of the agent commerce protocol. So on one side, we have the agents. So for example, ChatGPT. On the other side, we have the merchants. So for example, Shopify. And lastly, the payment processors. So for example, Stripe. So an agent is always needed. That will be the conversational interface in which the user performs their initial search and also their purchase. You'll then need the e-commerce platform. They handle all the data that's produced to register that order, do the delivery, so on. And then you always need the payment service provider, the PSP, which will actually process the secure transaction between the accounts. And what's interesting there is we've already developed the whole ecosystem between these 3 providers. So just to kind of summarize that the agent obviously doesn't need to be ChatGPT. It could be Mistral, it could be Gemini, it could be Perplexity. It can even be on social platforms, on WhatsApp or Alexa. It can also be marketplaces that have their own AI agents as well. Then you have your e-commerce platform. So here you can also have things like Magento, Wix. It can be a marketplace. And finally, you need your payment. So for example, we used the example Stripe, but it could also be Adyen, it could be Google Pay, it can be PayPal. And so we can see there can also be like an integrated experience as well. So for example, Google, my AI agent could be Gemini, my e-commerce platform could be Google Shopping, and then my payment system is Google Pay. And so you can see there's like an integrated platform there, and it's completely frictionless for the users as well. Now, we took the example of ACP because it's really the first protocol to be released. But as usual, the first one released tends to set the standards, and that's why we've given that example. So another example, which is quite impressive, is Instacart. If you don't know Instacart, they offer retail products that you can typically buy in supermarkets, and they've just launched their experience with Stripe and ChatGPT. So this is basically the experience. You're in ChatGPT, you choose your products, you confirm your checkout, and then you make your payment, as we just discussed there. So Nick Turley, who's the head of ChatGPT in the US, he said something that sums up this whole webinar quite nicely, which is the launch of the standard protocol agent is a new step towards realizing our vision, an AI which offers useful recommendation and that connects directly to real world services, saving the users time and effort in their daily lives.
Thanks, Graeme. Great summary. This is a lot of information. We have a couple more pieces of information left to give you, and then we'll be done with this presentation. So first piece of information, GPT apps. I don't know if you've heard about this. This was announced by ChatGPT or OpenAI in October of last year. And this announcement was followed by the first launches of apps in January. So what that is the ability for brands to build a sort of experience inside of ChatGPT that users can interact with. So a user could type at booking.com, find me hotel rooms for, $200 or less, or at Zillow, if you're into real estate, find me homes for sale for under $10 million. That kind of searches, which I wish I could do. So that's an interesting thing. It can also open the door to brands doing agentic commerce inside of the experience that they're going to build in these apps. So that's really something to keep an eye on in the months to come.
Yeah, and obviously we've spoken quite a bit about GEO in today's presentation, and what we're now offering is GEO audits. So it's really important, before you can start to improve your visibility, it's important to understand how you're actually performing in these AI tools. So we can basically audit your current position to figure out how you're performing across ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, understand what your overall visibility is, how often you're appearing versus your competitors, what kind of sources are being cited that are actually driving that information, and ultimately what you can actually do to start to improve your performance. And potentially help you develop a GEO strategy off the back of that as well. So if you're keen in understanding a little bit more about how your website's performing in AI tools, feel free to reach out to us. We would love to work with you on an audit.
Absolutely. Lastly, we spoke about the press here and there in this presentation. The press is considered by AI agents a little bit like user-generated content, in the sense that it's neutral sources of information, which is really something that they're looking for. So any chance you have of getting featured in the press, maybe your local newspaper around where you have locations, or press like Boxoffice Pro magazine, these are good chances of your authority rising for AI and your brand being recommended more often. We launched the Blue Ribbon recognition not so long ago, which is recognizing any new build and renovation since 2020. Applying to something like this gets you listed on the Boxoffice Pro website, and that kind of stuff just does not hurt one bit. So yeah, again, any chance you get of doing that, do it. And finally, just to reiterate some of the things we've said before, 3 actionable tips that you can do right now. One is check your website, make sure the information on it is rich. Add information to your website, to your location detail pages in particular. If you don't have a lot, say everything that you do, because this contextual information will help your website come up on AI, and make sure that this data is structured in a way that an AI can actually read it and understand it. That's the first thing. The second is improving and monitoring your online reputation. We've talked about UGC quite a bit. So have a look at your reviews on Google, TripAdvisor, Yelp, etc. If you don't have the time to deal with this, because it is time consuming, that's something that we can help you with. So don't hesitate to reach out. But in any case, take the time to answer wherever you can. And finally, have fun on AI and see how you come up. If you offer cocktails, search for best place to grab a cocktail before a movie with my girlfriends this weekend. See if your brand comes up as a result. If you offer sensory screenings, check if that comes up. Say, my son is, has special needs. Can you find me showtimes for people like him near me? That kind of stuff. Just see how you come up and reach out if you're interested in tracking this ongoing, because it's interesting and ongoing. It will likely lead to transactions. So something to keep an eye on. On that note, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to take a step back from your day-to-day and learn something new. Hopefully this was good information. If you have questions about any of it, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions and continue conversations on these topics. Thank you so much, Graeme.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll be in touch soon.